Brad, have you ever been playing with Legos with a little one or some kind of toy, and just to sort of make it interesting for yourself, you start. Well, I'll just tell you what I did. So my nephew starts bringing out all these Goku action figures, right? Like you know Goku from what is it, Dragon Ball
Z. Yes.
So I never read or watched Dragon Ball Z. I know roughly only through cultural osmosis, and you actually talked about it once. Dragon Ball Z. But for those that don't know, Dragon Ball Z, they kind of have these like sleeveless like ninja outfits. They're red and orange and blue and stuff. And but they all have this bonkers hair, right? I mean, you described the hair, Brad.
Big spiky hair, almost like a troll doll, right? The hair goes straight up. It's spiky. It's very dangerous looking hair, as a matter of fact. But they always look to me like they were troll dolls.
Yeah. And so because I don't know or necessarily care about Goku, but I'm having fun with my nephew, and he's introduced me. He's like, oh, this character is named I don't know, Trunks or somethte or Chunks or whatever.
And there's Vegeta.
Yeah, Vegeta.
And Goku. Yeah.
And so he's taking character after character, and they all have this ridiculous hair. And so with each character, I start to get his goat because I'm like, oh wow, what pretty hair. We could really brush this. Where's the comb for this? Did this come with the brush? And
Did this come with the brush?
Did this come with a brush? This is so pretty. And he's getting so frustrated with his uncle. He's like, that's not what Goku does. And then the next character comes out, and this guy has powers that could do, oh, look at that hair. That's so pretty. That's so much prettier than Goku. Where's the brush for this one? I'm just going to brush this while we talk. You don't brush Goku's hair. Goku doesn't have brushable hair. I'm like, how can you not brush Goku's hair? This is gorgeous hair. Look at this hair.
Yeah.
Uncle Dave, that's not what he does.
You're mean old Uncle Dave.
Oh, yeah, I was having so much fun with it. And then my wife was like, just play Goku. Leave him alone with the pretty hair. But I was like, you could absolutely make a My Little Pony or a troll version of Goku where it's just like this tufted hair and you could comb it.
Yeah.
Brad, you could style Goku's hair.
Oh my God. And the poor kid finally shows you a Kamehameha and you go, now do you use that with conditioner?
Is that Moose? Yeah. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about styling pretty hair and making comics.
And making a pretty living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon, and a bit of a stinker of an uncle, and the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I'm actually really excited to do this show because we talked about the topics beforehand, and it's a really good list. And on that note, Brad, let me jump us right into our first topic of the day. And I'm happy to say, for those that have been listening the last couple of weeks, it is now official. We can officially put the imprimatur of Comic Lab on this. We officially, Brad, hate the free level over on Patreon. Yep, we officially hate it.
Well, so much for saying that in unison. I thought, yeah, we hate the free membership tier on Patreon, and we need to talk about it because we are going to need to start thinking about how we're going to start dealing with this. And I got to tell you, Dave, I being completely honest, you were way out in front of the hate on this one, which between the two of us rarely happens. But you were on the phone to me saying, I hate this so much. It's bothering me so much. I've got all these people at the free membership tier, and I don't know what to do with them. I don't know whether they know that I don't post on the free membership tier. And you're on the phone with me, and I'm like, Dave, just let it go. Just what does it bother you? Just, okay, they're on the free membership tier. It's a connection at least. Let it go. Let it go. Things could be worse. Just if it literally, I was taking if you don't look at it, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
And just put it out of your mind, focus on your business. And the more we went down the road with this, the more all of a sudden I'm getting obsessed with it. And I'm like, wait a minute, how does this work? And how does that work? Next thing you know, I'm trying to figure it out. And the more we look into it, the worse it gets. This is a horrible implementation. And we need to talk about it because, like I said, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with this thing.
Yeah. And because we're going to do kind of a George Orwell 1984 5 minutes hate on the free membership tier, I want to at least start off with a fairness doctrine here and say, I see why Patreon is trying this. Social media is failing. And Brad, when he sends out stuff to his social media followers, 5 to 10% of people see it regularly. And even then, it's not consistent. They don't see 100% of what Brad is sending them. The algorithm is deciding. And so Patreon is like, that system is breaking, if not broken. So let's create basically our own social media feed where people can follow Brad for free. And on paper, in the basic idea, I get it. I see why they might want to try that, right? So in fairness, I'm not poo-pooing everything they've done. I get that first of all, that a company needs to evolve and you need to try things and some things are not going to work and they're not going to stick. And that's okay too. So I'm not, and again, bigger picture kindness, Brad and I love Patreon. It has been,
in general, yes.
It has been largely responsible for a big chunk of our career the last 5 years or so. Yeah. So huge fans of Patreon from both of us over here. We love 99% of what they do.
Well, and here's what this is when I really started to get upset about this, because I kind of take my own advice in that I always tell people, if you want to learn Patreon, be a Patreon user, use Patreon, and then you're going to get it from both sides, as a creator and as a patron.
Agreed.
And I found somebody whose work I really dug on Twitter. And the first thing I do is go over and check out the Patreon. I check out the Patreon and I get this it's the biggest thing on the page. Big come on for free membership. It's bigger than anything else. It's more prominent. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. This is horrible. Because number one, it's the first thing I see. And of course it's free. So of course I'm going to click on it. But I had a shot in that moment when I discovered somebody who I really like, and I go over to their Patreon. As a creator, the first thing I want them to see is not free. The first thing I want them to see is my lowest level paid tier, because that's how Patreon works. You walk them up the ladder. You give them that early access and whatever other small items you're giving them, and it shouldn't be even items at this point. You're giving them the small rewards that you offer at $2 and $3 level. And then you say, and for a little bit more, you can get these rewards. And now we're walking up the ladder. Nobody's walking up the ladder if they're stopping at free. Right. And if it's completely separate option, and if it's the biggest thing on the page, I looked at that and I'm like, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah, because like a lot of things in life, sometimes you only get that one opportunity of that point of action where someone is kind of mentally ready to click a button that puts their credit card number in. Yes. And if you miss that opportunity, because sometimes they happen to be at the home computer rather than on their phone, and they happen to be at a good place financially rather than like, oh, the paychecks aren't here yet. You know, whatever it is that you can imagine, there are moments of opportunity with certain readers. And if the first thing that they get is join for free as this big button, you might never have them ever come back to Patreon in a moment of, oh, I would like to support this artist, you know? Yeah.
To quote Alec Baldwin in Glengarry Glen Ross, a person does not walk on the car lot lest they want to buy. At some level, even Cheapskate McGee, was when I went to that person's Patreon page, a small part of me was thinking, well, if there's something good here, I'll be a member, right? And then now, okay, so going back to my original thought, what's the big deal, right? Okay, I'll tell you what the big deal is. The big deal is somebody signs up for your free membership tier and then they go on with the rest of their lives because they've got other things. They're not thinking about you 24/7.
And somewhere in their mind, they're thinking, I'm supporting Brad Geiger. It's nebulous. They're not sure how, but Brad said, support me on Patreon. You clicked join for free. And so you think you're somewhat quote unquote supporting, Brad Geiger.
And now and now you're a member. So, and also, since you're a member, you're expecting to get things.
Yes.
Right? Because, of course, you're subscribed. Even if it was a free membership, you're subscribed. You're expecting to get things. Now, what are you getting? Well, I ain't posting anything on my free membership tier. And we're gonna come around to that in a little bit, but I'm not posting anything on my free membership tier. So now this person had connected with me, was interested enough that they might have jumped in at the $2 level, might have walked up the ladder. Instead, they think they actually did something by subscribing to my free tier. Now they're gone on living their lives, and they don't realize that they're never going to hear from me again.
Right.
In most cases, right? And then they're going to forget I existed. And now I've got to they've got to find me on social media again. Something that I post has to show up in the algorithm in front of their eyes, remind them that I exist, walk them back to Patreon. Remember, you've got to hear a pitch 7 times before you even think about making a decision, statistically speaking. And now I've got to start that all over again, right? And so now I've got to circle them back to my free membership. And if you're thinking that's pretty bad, just wait. It gets worse.
Yeah, it gets worse. So I happen to be doing a special offer at the moment over at patreon.com/drive. That's DRIVE. Anyway, the special offer is to give away an ebook when you join at the $5 up level, right? And so I try, Brad, in good faith to say, okay, I have these 330 free members that I don't want.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. For all these people that are saying, Dave and Brad, you don't get it. You're supposed to walk these people up the ladder. I go, all right, let's walk them up the ladder. This is a special offer. What a great enticement to get them to join Patreon, the real Patreon. So I go to message them, right? 330 people, of which only 90 have provided their emails to the creator. So I can't reach, 240 of them of the 330? Yeah. What am I supposed to do with those free members? Like, how is that helping me at all if I can't even reach out and message them? So I go, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll make a free post that says join Patreon for this special offer. But Brad, I quite legitimately don't want to bug my paying patrons saying join Patreon. I'm just going to confuse them if I say join at the $5 level by Thanksgiving. So I go, okay, I'm just going to make a post that's just to the free people. Well, you can't do that on Patreon. You can either do everyone or you can do the paid tiers on a selected basis, right? Yeah. I don't want to talk to or deal with the paid people. I just want to message the free people that I never asked for and I'm trying to work up the ladder. I can't do it. It's the most bass-backward system that, like, I can't even talk to directly the free people that I never asked for.
Right. You can't send a message to them because 2/3 of them did not allow you to access their email address, which is fair. You can't direct a post to only the free members. You can only direct a post to the free members and everybody else. Right. You get them in one fell swoop.
Which leads to confusion for the people that are already there and paying and happy, you know.
Super confusion. And it gets even worse. It gets even worse. This just came in from one of our Comic Lab backers on the Discord server. He says, hey, I've been following Brad's free membership on his Patreon, right? And he says, get this. I'm getting all of the early access rewards after they become public. So follow me here. I put something out, let's say 6 days early. He doesn't get it on that day. My paid Patreon backers get it early, 6 days early. But 6 days later, when it goes public, then he gets an email or a notification on his Patreon app saying you've got something through your Patreon membership. But it doesn't say that. And he put a screen grab of his email. What the email says is, hooray, you've got early access to Brad Geiger's Evil Inc. It's on the free publication day. On this day, it's free to the public. As a free member, he's getting the misinformation that he got an early access reward. And this is a big problem because early access, as you remember, is the first step on my ladder. He thinks he's getting it for free because Patreon is telling him he's getting it for free. Now, at this point, we've got a problem we need to solve.
Right. And I mean, I guess you could say something like, like, let's say it's an early release on December 1st, but it's not going to go public until December 15th or something, right? I'm making up dates. You could say, hooray, it's December 1st. You're getting this, but then it won't. Then for the people that, what? No, I
you don't have you don't get to put anything in there.
Oh,
Patreon puts the subject line in.
God bless America. Really?
You don't put the subject line. Patreon puts the subject line.
Pickles.
So you don't have any control over that. They say, hey, take a look at this. You're getting early access. Meanwhile, it's not early access and you have no way to change that Patreon subject line.
Yeah, and so many times this whole thing comes back to marketing, because it's essentially saying, like, imagine, put this into any other context. McDonald's sells burgers and fries. They want you to walk in and sell burgers and fries. Yes, they're loaded with preservatives and salt and fake, but they're burgers and fries. So imagine if you go into a McDonald's, you're on a road trip, you got $3 burning in your pocket and you're hungry, but you walk in and corporate McDonald's, not that franchisee owner, but corporate McDonald's is giving away free fries to everybody that walks in the door. You're going to take the free fries and go back on your road trip. Do you know what I mean? Like, you had a chance as a franchisee to hook this person, or not to sell this person burgers and fries, but corporate McDonald's is giving away French fries, and you're like, God damn it, corporate McDonald's. That's what I feel like is happening here. I sometimes have just one chance to hook somebody that is feeling a spark for Drive or Sheldon or Comic Lab, and then they go there and it says join for free. Now listen, it's not the fault of the potential backer that this thing is offering to them, saying join for free. Of course they're going to be like, well, that sounds reasonable. Yes, I will join for free.
Right.
They don't need or want to know all the nuances of why that's being presented to them. They think that this is something that Brad wants to give them or I want to give them, you know?
Yes.
And so it's just a lot of marketing confusion about what Patreon is and what it's supposed to be doing.
Right. And you'd be a well-meaning person might very easily say, well, wait a minute. All you got to do is put a message in your free post that reminds people that they can upgrade to a paid position and get all these rewards.
Right.
The problem is, like we said, there's no way to reach just the free members.
Right.
So what you're going to be doing then is sending out what actually amounts to spam messages to the people you've already converted into paid membership. That telling somebody that's already paying me $10 a month and has been for years that they can upgrade their membership to a paid membership is not good, and it's going to piss people off. I'll tell you what else. I already post between 25 and 32 times a month for my Patreon backers. Paid posts, right? Between 25 and 32 times a month. I am not going to add to that by posting stuff that I would regularly be posting on Twitter to try to generate a new member, right? Because the other way of looking at this, Dave, is that we should use that free membership tier to post everything that we're currently posting on Twitter for free, right? And now I'm upping, what the hell? I'd be upping my post rate on Patreon to between 40 and 60 times, if not more. People are gonna leave my Patreon just to shut me up. I've always said in the past, it's impossible to spam somebody on Patreon. Well, they proved me wrong. If you do that, you absolutely could be doing it, because you are sending them a bunch of stuff they don't want. Because the spam on Patreon thing was all about paid posts, right? And they don't want to hear from me that much. Well, no, they do. They're your fans. If you're posting exclusives, my opinion is you can't post enough exclusives. But if you're doing all that and then a bunch of junk that you post on Twitter that is meant to disappear in 7 seconds, now it's a problem. Now you're going to start losing people because they're going to leave the Patreon just to shut you up, or they're going to turn their Patreon notifications off. Then a month later, realize that they weren't reading you. They don't care anymore. And now, boom, you've lost that member. Now they cancel their membership, right? All of which is bad news. This is not as easy as just putting a post down on the free membership tier saying, hey, everybody, remember, you could upgrade to a paid membership. It's not that easy. This problem is a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, and there's a truism that I forget what it is, which is, don't ascribe to malevolence what you can ascribe to, what is it, incompetence?
Incompetence.
And I think I don't necessarily ascribe malevolence to this. I think it was well-meaning on Patreon's part.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was thought through, especially because the basic communication between a creator to just the free tiers, or in any way that could isolate the free tiers, is so broken and misshapen as a system. Because like Brad said, Brad could have had a sugar daddy he or she has been giving at the $10 level for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
It would be confusing as hell to that person if they're suddenly getting messages saying, join me on Patreon at the $5 level and you'll get this evil link ebook or whatever it is, whatever Brad.
Right.
You can imagine them being like, hey, Brad, what is this? Why am I getting, am I no longer a member? Did my credit card fail?
Yes.
Like, the communication, you got to be really careful about this. The communication gets muddy real quick. And Patreon has made it really muddy really quick.
And if you want to do something like that, one of the simple solutions from Patreon side is give us the ability to just message free members.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist. Or or the only way you can become a free member is by including your email address so we can direct message our free members.
Yeah, which I tried.
That's not possible.
Doesn't work.
That's not possible. Oh, yeah. We got the same thing on the Comic Lab Discord, or I'm sorry, on the Comic Lab membership. I just checked it out. It's the same thing. About a third of the people that have signed up for the free membership tier on Comic Lab listed their emails. And so we could reach about a third of them.
And listen, this is a little tinfoil hatty, but a lot of the people that are signing up for my free membership, they have a lot of numbers in their email, if you know what I mean, Brad.
Listen,
it's a lot of bot farmy feeling from those emails. So I'm not entirely sure that Patreon is screening for humans in any way, shape, or form.
First-hand experience, because I deal with this on webcomics.com a lot. And I have to have the page to sign up has to be publicly available, right? And I put all kinds of CAPTCHA stuff and all this stuff. Bots still get through. I still have to go through every week and weed out my users from the bots that signed up because they think they're going to post spam comments and all this other stuff. And I've done it for years, and I get to the point where I can recognize a bot email address. And it's not that I'm a genius, like Dave said, bunch of numbers, a bunch of nonsense, gobbledygook, and boy, if you've got .ru at the end of your email address, I kind of got you pegged, right? Yeah. So I see these all the time. So they just jump out at me. And I started going through the free sign up, the people on the free membership tier of my Patreon. And I'll be danged if I don't start seeing some of these same types of emails. And it's like, what are we actually doing here? And that's where I get scared, because if the only reason I'll join you with the tinfoil hat. And because the only reason to do that I can understand, and there might be another one that I don't understand, but the one that comes to mind first for me is that they want to very much inflate their user numbers. And there's only one reason for them to do that, and that is if they're getting prepped for a sale.
Yeah, yeah.
That scares me.
Again,
and I have no proof. I can't say it one way or the other, but that one keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I do think the spam bots, again, I don't attribute it necessarily to malevolence. I think it's someone didn't think through how readily bot networks would want to try to post onto these forums. I think let's go to the bare bones thing of the internet. Bot networks try to go wherever they can go to become members or postable commenters and that kind of thing. So they can tell you about some stupid website. Anyway, but I'm kind of with Brad on this. If you kind of follow the money on why suddenly Patreon would be pushing this free thing, it feels a lot like somebody in the VC market needs to inflate these numbers really quickly to prep for a sale. And so I don't like it because, again, like merch for members, like some other moves that Patreon has done, this is not necessarily, it's being pitched as a move that helps us. It's not necessarily a move that helps us.
Also, what the hell happened on October 12th? Go into your Patreon, take a look at the members, and just look at the free members, and you'll probably see, like I have on 2 different accounts, that I got a bushel basket full of new free members on October 12th. Something happened on that day. I got 3 screens full of people that joined me at the free membership tier on October 12th. Now, what are the chances of all of them making the same decision on the same day? What the hell happened on October 12th?
I agree with you. My spidey sense was that those were previously followers that had been computer redirected to becoming the new free members. That was my thought. But I still trust your suspicions on all of this, because it's weird as hell. This whole thing, again, I love Patreon. I love what it does. And what it does is it makes distributed regular payments from fans and followers so that they can have access to my material that I give them as exclusives and sneak peeks and early reads. They do that very well. All of this kind of messes up the works of all of that. It makes it harder for people to do free trials because that gets confusing as to whether this is a free membership or a free trial. Remember, from my own experience, free trials were working. Those were great.
That's right. You were doing great with free trials.
It muddies up the marketing and the sales because you're trying to tell people Patreon is a money-based way, very small payments that you can support an artist. This messes up that. It messes up the actual sales because people go, they think they're buying into whatever you've asked them to do on Patreon because they joined you for free. It messes up the basic communication because I can't separate my free communication with my paid communication. And in the meantime, I could either over spam all my paid people or I could not be able to reach my free people. It's not well implemented on the basic core idea, which is what they probably should have done, Brad, is just created an opt-in or opt-out side feed of a social media that everyone could join for Brad on or via Patreon. It's just the Patreon social media feed. And that's not what this is. And I wish it could have been something like that.
And frankly, and I hate to say it, all they needed to do was take a look at what Substack is doing, because Substack is actually doing it really well in that they've got a free feed there and it has a really good method of offering discoverability. And that's the thing. All of this stuff that we're talking about with Patreon trying to make a pivot to social media, it misses the fact that we don't need social media to talk to our readers. We've got 100, like we said last episode, we've got 100 ways to talk to our readers.
Yes.
What we need social media to give us is a way to find that new reader, the person that doesn't know who we are yet. And that's discoverability. And none of what we talked about in this free membership tier offers us discoverability. And that's what we want out of social media. For me, it's a real, and I'm sorry, it's a little league, it's a rookie mistake of hey, I get that they say, hey, Patreon could have an opportunity to pivot into social media because all of social media is upended right now. Okay, I get that. I totally get that. But then they say, so here's what we're going to do. And it shows that they don't understand how artists and creators use social media. They think about social media the way my mom does, right? Oh, you use it to talk to people. No, that isn't it at all. It's not. That's not what's going on social media at all. I'm not using it to talk to the people that I know. That's part of it. But the much bigger thing, and I'll even go backwards. Why am I having conversations with the people that I know on Twitter? Because I hope that the people that they know see that conversation and find me. If there wasn't that, I wouldn't be talking to anybody on Twitter. It's not to my best interest to talk to somebody on Twitter. The only reason I'm having that conversation is to expand my engagement, is expand my net, and to hope that maybe one of their followers or somebody that's connected to them finds me. It's the only reason I talk on social media. It ain't because I enjoy it. It ain't because it's for my health. And it sure as hell ain't because I got nothing better to do. I'm doing that to make use of the marketing, promotion, and engagement potential that it's got. For Patreon not to understand that bugs me. It really bugs me. It's okay that my mom doesn't understand why I'm talking on social media. It's not so okay that Patreon doesn't get it.
Yeah, and I think Brad can back this up, but this whole episode has been among the most cussy conversations I've had with him in recent years because every step of the way has frustrated me. This is a service that I did not ask for. I cannot fully shut off. I can diminish it. I've done that with all my Patreons. I've diminished it. I cannot fully shut it off. I don't want them to exist. And yet when they do exist, I try to accept it and say, I'd like to communicate with them. I can't direct message them. I can't make a post that's just to them. And I somewhat suspect that most of them aren't real humans.
Right.
And so the whole every step of the way has just frustrated me from a marketing, from a sales, and from a communication standpoint between me and my actual fans who have been lovingly using Patreon, and I the same with them. So I'm really cussy about the whole thing, and I don't normally get cussy.
We were just winding down, and you reminded me of one more thing.
Oh, okay.
So this is my Niagara Falls. It's just, there's always one more thing. But you reminded me of one more thing, because another obvious answer is, why don't you do have email addresses for a third of the people that signed up at this tier?
Sure.
Why not just write them and ask them, hey, why are you signed up at this tier? Then you could get some information you could work with, right? You could get some idea of the thought process behind signing up at that tier. And that's what I did last week. I took a small sampling of them that had given their email addresses as part of their sign up. And I just messaged them directly. And I said exactly that. Hey, I'm thrilled that you're signed up. Thank you so much. But it's going to help me an awful lot to understand what your expectations are as being part of this tier, because the fact of the matter is, I don't actually post a lot of stuff at the free membership tier, and I don't want you to be disappointed. Quick email. What was that? 2 sentences. In and out. Very easy to respond to.
Okay. What was the response?
Nothing. Crickets. Not one of them responded. So now I've got an even bigger problem. Either they're not real people, or they're not getting the message through Patreon, or, of course, to a certain extent, the third obvious answer is they got the email and they didn't care enough to write back,
right.
Which is actually a bigger problem all in and of itself. Because if they've got that little interest in what I'm doing on Patreon, they don't belong on Patreon. They belong on Twitter. You can ignore me on Twitter. I expect it on Twitter. But the fact that you're on Patreon and ignoring me lets me know that it's okay. It's okay, but you're useless. And I don't want you a part of my Patreon if you're going to be useless. I need to be able to talk to you and you talk back. I need there to be some kind of
heartbeat.
buy-in.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're useless, I got thousands of useless people on Twitter, and I expect them to be useless. When we get to Patreon, now you've got to have a little bit more interest in the day that an email comes from Brad Geiger. It's got to be. And it always has been that way up until free membership started.
First of all, wow. It is because I did also message the 90 people that are following me for free. Remember, out of my list of 330, the 90 that allowed for messaging via a email, a lot of which had weird number strings in it. I'm just saying that again. Yeah. Anyway, I messaged the 90. I also heard from none of them, Brad.
None of them.
So the fact that you and I have both tried this, because so I want to say, I know we were closing down this conversation, but I want to say one last thing, because I almost did this, and I'll be honest, the voice of Brad Geiger rung in my head, and I didn't do it because I heard Brad said, no, that's just cutting off your nose to spite my face. Here's what I thought I was going to do. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in and methodically block every single free member. Because why the hell not? What does it gain me that they're there? What does it gain me that they exist? I don't want them in there at all. And then I heard Brad saying, but there might be 5 real people in there, and they might be on the way to backing you on Patreon. And I'll be honest, the conversation I was having in my head was like, no, to hell with them. They should have joined Patreon. Why are they why are they joining for free? Like, that was my whole conversation. And so I'm directing this to you now, the real Brad Geiger. What should I do? Should I block them? Is this a bad idea? I know you're going to say it's a bad idea, but tell me why. Why is it a bad idea?
It's not a bad idea. The only way I would use to talk you out of it is that it's going to be super time consuming, because the right thing to do so what you don't want to block somebody who could become your Patreon backer later.
Right.
But you could do something that sometimes I do on Twitter when I want to be sneaky. I'll block the person, wait 30 seconds, and then unblock them. They get disconnected from me, but they never know that it happened, because they don't get a message that they were blocked. Now on Patreon, I think they get a message, but I would block them and then unblock them, because then they could always become a Patreon backer at some point in the future because they've been unblocked, but you've disrupted the connection until then. You know what I mean?
Wait. So I can go in with these 330 people. Let's just say, call them ABC. I block A, and then I wait 30 seconds. Like I go through my whole list of 330, and then I go back through the list of 330 and I unblock them. That would mean they could eventually join, but they're currently unlinked from my Patreon.
Yes.
That's the best solution. I am 100% doing that.
The only thing is, unlike Twitter, they will get a message from Patreon saying,
Brad, I'm so excited about this. They'll get the message. If they're a real person, they're going to follow up. And if they care, if there's a heartbeat at all, they'll be like, hey, what happened? I got a message saying I was blocked. Oh, you're real. Great. You are listening. Let me tell you about my special offer.
Let me direct you to my $2 level.
Right? I mean, am I wrong there? If I get a heartbeat, then I know there's a real person.
And listen, as long as our listeners don't blow our cover, you can always try the whole, I hit that button by mistake. I'm glad you're here. I can talk to you about Patreon now, Gee whiz, I don't know what I was doing.
Oh, gosh, you know what? I guess I'm older than I thought. Need those new reader glasses. I must have clicked where I needed to click. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, these old fat fingers hit that block button. I don't know what happened. I'm
not kidding. I am not shitting you. I think I will do this because that's how frustrated and fucking mad I am about this whole free membership thing. It's really frustrating me. I can't reach them. I can't message them. They do nothing for the Patreon. Why are they even there? I'm going to block and then unblock them. That's what I'm going to do.
Do it with a small test
sample
first.
Going all 330. No, I'm going in for 100%.
I've blocked people individually, but I've never done a mass blocking. And I just want to make sure you can find the people you blocked and to unblock them easily. You know what I mean?
You know what?
So do it with 10 and then I don't.
Oh, I see. I do.
No, I'm blocking these people. I've never seen you so worked up about this.
Because I've really spent the better part of this last week. You saw how angry I've been on FaceTime. I spent the better part of this last week trying to figure out how do I message these people that are maybe not even real and also have signed up for a system, maybe in miscommunication, thinking they were supporting me on Patreon. And or I don't know. I'm just frustrated by this whole thing. I get that I sound childish, but I'm frustrated by it.
No, well, like I said, I started out thinking that you sounded like you were taking it too seriously, and within a couple of days, I realized just how serious this actually is. This is a problem. Patreon needs to address this problem. I get that it was probably a very good idea, implemented poorly, but we need to get in touch with them through the support desk.
Yeah, good luck with that. I've tried 3 times. Yeah, but anyway.
Okay, well, I love them so much. I wanted to give them benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I know I've had similar experiences. All we can do is hope. I guess is just hope that they're going to get on top of this, because free membership is a really, really big mistake, and it's going to end up hurting us in the long run, I think.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, we've got a question from one of our Comic Lab listeners, and it goes like this. It's coming in from Jeannie, who says, love, love, love the show. I learned so much, and you are both such delights. The question might have been answered in the past, but what about parody? How do you deal with copyrighted material? And so obviously, Jeannie points out that Mickey Mouse comes out as one of the top fears, Disney-related property. But copyright, fair use in general. Let's talk about that because it's one of the most misunderstood, misapplied legal aspects of working in comics.
Yep.
And we should probably take a little bit of time just to discuss it in general, don't you think?
Yeah. So just for broad strokes, parody, as we all know, is sort of the imitation. Traditionally, it was like of a person, of an idea, of a genre, of a style. But now when we think of parody, it's usually of like a star or a moment in a movie or a video game or a brand, right? Because that's sort of what it's become. And the people that get away with it the most are sort of Mad Magazine or SNL or to some extent The Simpsons or Family Guy, right? And I do it as well. I do corporate and brand parody and cultural effects parody and all that sort of stuff. But I want to say that it's totally doable. It's completely legal within the First Amendment rights to parody things, right? But very often it's one of those situations where the biggest lawyer wins. So you can parody Mickey Mouse ostensibly, but you better be damn sure you're willing to lawyer up when the House of Mouse comes at you for that. So I kind of, every time I do a parody, I know that I'm a little bit playing with fire because corporate America specifically, if there's a dollar sign attached to a brand or something, they get very uppity about when people start to parody their brands. And so, yes, well, in fact, maybe I'll turn this over to Brad. Yes, Brad, Mad Magazine and SNL get away with it, but what's the big caveat there?
Yeah, well, part of the caveat there is that they are all attached to much bigger corporate structures. So Mad Magazine being part of Warner Brothers, for example, they can take a shot at anything in the Warner Brothers family, and the Warner Brothers lawyers aren't necessarily going to come after them.
Right.
But there's so let's talk about this in some more general terms. And we always have to take a little pause for the cause here and note neither one of us is a lawyer. You should not consider this to be informed in any way. Although that's pretty good advice for the podcast in general, but you should not consider this to be legal advice. But let's talk about the most important concept in parody, and that is fair use.
Yes.
So when they made copyright law, part of what they built into copyright law was fair use. And what they said was that that you could use copyrighted material for a limited, and this is the important word, transformative purpose, so that you could comment on it, you could criticize it, or so that you could parody it. And now, what is transformative is a gray area. And the writers of that law, of copyright law, left it gray purposefully, because they wanted to make sure that there was wiggle room in there. They didn't want to box it in too much. They wanted it to be open to a certain amount of interpretation so that we could have the most amount of freedom as possible to comment and criticize a copyrighted work. So that's really one of the most important things to understand about this, is that transformative as a concept is a purposefully gray area.
Yeah, one of the ways that one of the head lawyers at Mattel described parody to me was, there's that famous, I think it was the Supreme Court ruling about pornography, that you know it when you see it,
Yeah.
And he said to me that a lot of judges' decisions around parody are are subjective, first of all, and they know it when they see it. Like, well, that's parody. You can't sue over that. Or come on now, brand X, you got to calm down here. They're just parodying you. You can clearly tell. But you're kind of playing with fire, because sometimes you might get a judge or a decision that's like, that's not parody. That's just plain using the brand. And you're like, oh, I thought I was parodying. Oh God.
Yeah.
So it can get a little dangerous for you as the non-legal art practitioner. And so that's why it's also culturally, Brad, there is sort of not a knock-on effect, but a sort of cultural weight that comes with the fact that Mad Magazine, The Onion, SNL, I'm trying to think of other ones, The Simpsons, Family Guys, they're sort of known for their parodies, right? Like at this point, they have a cultural weight behind them. So any judge, any legal case that's brought against them, they're going to be like, Your Honor, clearly all of society is aware that Mad Magazine does parody. So therefore, blank, 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 right? But you can't make the same argument with Brad Geiger or Dave Kellett, because they'll first of all point to our culturally very small audiences, and then say culturally no one knows who they are, nor that they're familiar with the fact that we're doing parody. So anyway, it gets more dangerous for you as a small, independent, individual artist.
Yeah. There's 4 things that you've got to keep in mind with fair use and whether your work falls into fair use. There's 4 factors that they keep in mind. The first one is the purpose of the use. In other words, why are you using this other person's copyrighted material, right? And the one that always gets the example here is education, or criticism, or journalism. If I'm doing a story about Dave Kellett's work, right, I can take a Sheldon comic strip and put it in my story to say, this is an example of that work. Or I can use it in an education sense, right? I can say, here's a little, I can't do the whole thing. I can't put a Sheldon book up there, but I can use it for educational purposes. Number 2 is the nature of the copyrighted work itself, right? What kind of work am I stealing, quote unquote, to do my parody? What's the nature of that work? That plays into it as well. Was it widely available, or was it published? Did somebody put a copyright on it but never really publish it widely? That could play into it, right? How many people are aware of this? And number 3, the amount or substantiality of the portion used, right? Am I just using a character in one panel, or am I taking a character from Dave's comic and making him a co-star in my comic and putting his face right out on the book, right? Now I'm going over the line, right? Because I'm not just doing it once or twice in a panel here and there in the background. I'm taking Arthur the Duck and making him a part of the cast of Evil Inc. That's going to be a problem, right? And of course, the 4th one, the one that we always miss, is what effect is this having on the potential market or value of the work that you are, that is copyrighted, that you're parodying, right? Are you having an effect on the market? And that's why you always see these people on YouTube saying, I claim no copyright for this music. I'm just using it as the background of my video. Well, that doesn't play into it.
Yeah.
Right? You could, the example I always use is if Dave's selling, we'll go back to Arthur the Duck. If Dave's selling an Arthur the Duck t-shirt for $10 and I give away a bunch of free Arthur the Duck t-shirts, I could sit there and say, but I'm not charging anything for that. And Dave would say, well, it doesn't matter. You just flooded the market with Arthur the Duck t-shirts, and now I can't sell mine for $10. So it's the effect, not whether you're making money or not. It's the effect you're having on the potential market for this. Those are the 4 criteria of fair use. If you keep those in mind, it's going to help you make a lot better decisions on your parody.
And sort of the 5th consideration, I always go back to it, is who's got the bigger lawyer? Because if Disney has 20 on-staff attorneys, and they need to keep them busy anyway, and you have to pay $40,000 to have an attorney represent you for the next 6 months. I mean, I can guarantee you who's going to win in that situation. That's sort of the 5th version of the 5th consideration for fair use. So anyway, the good news is Parody largely has a good history in the U.S. in courts in terms of allowability, right? Judges tend to want to allow for free speech and are aware of the ever-growing corporate sort of tentacles in terms of free speech with brands. Where I just want to put a little caveat on all this, which is if you are going to incorporate or make fun of a brand or a thing, an object, cultural object, you can't incorporate and use another brand or cultural object towards the parody of the first one. Because then, if I'm not wrong, that's what got Penny Arcade in trouble with that Strawberry Shortcake one many years back, and why Hallmark sued. And I don't know if they sued them or just sent to C&D. But because you can't, if you're going to be parodying a thing, it has to be about the thing or on the thing. You can't use the thing to make fun of something else.
Well, that's where we get into mashups, right? Which are always very popular. And we have a really good example of that not too long ago in the world of comics. A group of people put out a book called Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go. Okay. And if you remember, there was this Dr. Seuss book called Oh, the Places You'll Go. And what it did was it recreated that book, but it inserted Star Trek characters and tropes into that book. So it was drawn in the style of Dr. Seuss. It used a parallel language to the Dr. Seuss language and syntax. It used parallel illustrations, but instead of Dr. Seuss characters, they had Star Trek Federation uniforms on, and they had little phasers and so on and so forth. That was of course, the intellectual property holders took them to court, and they proved that it was copyright infringement. They had to stop publishing that book because they said, "Hey, you're treading on our trademark." Yep. And this, not only does that go to what you're talking about with Strawberry Shortcake.
Treading on their copyright, probably, right? Not their,
both. But yes, this was a copyright infringement. But they're also, let's face it, they're trying to basically. Here's my point with trademark, and that is this: no one is buying that book because of the writer or the artist. They're buying it either because they're a Dr. Seuss fan, or they're buying it because they're a Star Trek fan. And those two creators, one of them, I think, was somebody who had written stuff for Star Trek. So there was a tenuous connection there. But you see what I mean? You could, if you're going that far, where it's the whole concept of the book, and you could have somebody's lawyer point at your product and say, nobody's going to buy that unless they're a fan of this intellectual property or that intellectual property. There's no other reason to buy this book, right?
Right.
Now you don't have a leg to stand on. And for me, mentally, I guess that falls under trademark. But you see where I'm going.
Yes.
That's where I don't have a problem. I'll give you an example from my own life. I did a comic not too long ago, and I needed a fun little bouncy character. So I put a beholder from Dungeons and Dragons in. Because it was fun, a bunch of eyes, it was fun to draw. And I made a big mistake. I put a little, in my Discord server, I put a little preview up because I thought it was such a cool panel. Hey, coming soon at Evil Inc., blah, blah. And the first, within 5 minutes, the first comment I got was, you better be careful. You're going to get sued by Dungeons and Dragons for that. And so here's the thing. Let's talk about that. The chances of my getting sued for using a Beyonder in 3 or 4 panels on the inside pages of a book are infinitesimally low. He's not going to be on the cover. It's not going to be the big book of Beyonders. He's going to appear in maybe 3 panels out of a 120-page book. There's no public-facing website that he's going to be on, right? The chances of my getting sued for that are infinitesimally low. I took him out and I changed him to just a bouncing ball with a big eye because, and maybe this will sound familiar to you listeners as well, in that moment, I realized I had done a comic I was really proud of. I had done what I thought was a really good little 3 or 4 page story. I was happy with it. I was thrilled. I could not wait to share this with my audience. And I realized in that moment that instead of talking about this comic that I had wrote, they were going to be spending all of their time trying to explain to me fair use in copyright, something that, let's face it, they don't understand very well because they're not creating comics. I knew that I was well within my bounds, but I realized that if I put this up, I was going to be explaining it to people all week long.
Yeah.
And the thought of doing that depressed the hell out of me. So at that point, it was so much easier just to change that character and put up a comic that we talked about, and all the good parts about that comic were at the forefront. I didn't end up drawing a Beholder, but if I had, I would have been hating myself for it because I'd have to end up explaining fair use doctrine to instead of talking about this comic that I created.
Yeah.
So do with that what you will. But the fact of the matter is, understanding fair use can not only help you to make better choices, but it could help you, if you're like me, just say, I don't want any part of any of this. It's just so much easier just to make him an original character and go on talking about the comic that I created.
Yeah, and honestly, the happiest thing that I can do with something like Drive is fresh original characters, fresh original situations, fresh original storylines. I never have to worry about it. With Sheldon, I dip into parody every once in a while. I do have to worry about it. But I'll be honest, it's not necessarily fun to think about like, if DC sent me a takedown notice or a C&D on this, I kind of would have to comply because I just don't want to deal with that bullshit, even if I was in the right. So I will be honest that creating your own original characters, your own original stories, your own original moments, that's the safer route. But parody has a place in fair use. And I will say one final thing on my side, Brad. When you said there's an infinitesimally small chance that you would get sued or get a takedown notice for that appearance of the Beyonder in 3 panels in the middle of a book, all of which is totally valid. Because you have to realize that there are humans making these decisions. And so there's this weird gray area. If Brad was culturally massive, like The Simpsons or SNL or Mad Magazine, they're probably not going to sue because they don't want to deal with it. They're humans too. They're like, look, we're probably going to lose that parody case. It's culturally established that Mad Magazine is a parody source, so let's not do it. They also might not even go through the trouble if Brad is a tiny little outlet, you know, and it appears on 2 or 3 panels in the middle of one of his books. They're probably, you know, they're like, do I even want to send this C&D or this takedown notice or, you know, send notice of concern? They might not even do that. It's this weird gray area in the middle. And that's where the sort of realism of modern life is, where Brad's just big enough to have an audience, just big enough where there might be concern. And then the lawyers might be like, all right, let's send a C&D or a takedown and that kind of thing.
But even like you did a book full of, you said, okay, in Sheldon, sometimes I do parodies and so forth. You did an entire book of those, right? It was your pop culture collection.
Pop culture book,
Did you have and in that pop culture collection, you had somebody in a Star Trek uniform, except they weren't.
They weren't.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at that, the cover of Pop Culture, because the cover was where I was most concerned. Yes. Because that is the marketing side, and that is the sales point, and that's where lawyers would be most concerned, because you could be using the weight, the heft, the sort of salesmanship of the brand to sell something that is not of the brand, right? And so they're obviously going to have most concern about the cover. So but I needed some way to communicate pop culture. So I had a character wearing a Hogwartsy type scarf, but I don't think I put a scar on his forehead. I had a character wearing a Star Trek E type shirt, but I think I cleverly covered the Star Trek logo with a hand or an arm or something, if I remember correctly. So is that what you were getting at? So there was it was all visually adjacent to the brand, but I tried to make it, as a lawyer at Mattel once told me, 30% different from what the brand itself would have been. Yeah.
And it was, and there was also a Batman-ish character. There was a superhero. Flacco was in a Batman type character. Yes. Cape and cowl. So what's important about that? So you couldn't point at that and say, well, the only reason to buy this book would be if you're a Star Trek fan. No, you had 3 different properties that were indicated, and they were indicated adjacently.
Yeah, they were all transformed to a percentage, Yeah.
Yes. And the name of the book was Pop Culture, not the big book of Star Trek jokes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. No joke.
It wasn't drawn in the style of somebody else like Dr. Seuss. It was your own stuff. You couldn't, and if you're flipping through the book, one page is Star Trek, one page is Star Wars, the next page is Doctor Who, the next page is Firefly, and Hogwarts, and so on and so forth. So it's so diluted. You can't say, well, there's only one reason to buy this book, and that's because if you're a Harry Potter fan. No, Harry Potter was only 15% of the book. Then it was a whole bunch of other stuff. That puts you so clearly in the safe zone that I can't imagine you spent any appreciable amount of time worrying about getting a cease and desist from any one of these properties.
Right. And so let's compare that to another book called Goodnight Batcave, which was done by our friend over at Mad Magazine, Tom Richmond. First of all, a delightful book. I really enjoyed it. The idea is it combines Goodnight Moon with Batman to make a Goodnight Batcave book, right? First of all, delightful idea, really fun. Second of all, you're immediately going, well, holy shit, Tom's stepping on 2 different copyrights and maybe trademarks in the idea of Batcave and also Goodnight Moon as a title. I don't know if those are trademarked or not, but you get where I'm going with that. So you're like, well, how did this come about? How did this book even happen? Well, think about it. Mad Magazine and Tom, as an employee of Mad Magazine, probably went to the corporate overlords and said, hey, you also own Batman. And Goodnight Moon is published by, I don't remember what it is, but they're owned by HarperCollins, which I think is owned by Warner Brothers as well. What I'm getting at there is it's either done with licensing or with corporate ownership, and it was all official. So I can see younger artists seeing that kind of book existing and going, well, why can they do it? Well, the way they can do it is because they own the damn books or they license the right to the damn books, Or
they bought the licensing rights.
Right. And so to Brad's point about length, it's very different for Brad to use a beholder for 3 panels, of which it's a joke, than for someone to do a full-length book incorporating all of Batman and Batman's tropes and characters and all of Goodnight Moon and all Goodnight Moon's tropes and characters. The only way that's done is through ownership, corporate ownership, or through licensing. So don't think that you can do what a book like that does for Parody. They do it because money is involved, and the money is usually within in-house under a corporate umbrella.
Absolutely. No, actually, no, I disagree. I completely disagree. No, I'm sorry. I can't even pretend. I'm just trying to give you a good transition into our next question from Comic Lab Patreon backers. This one's coming in from Jay, and you'll see exactly what I mean as soon as you hear this question. Have you guys ever had a heated argument or debate over a comics-related topic? In other words, is there something that you two can just not see eye to eye on? By the way, as long as we're talking about eyes, Jay was the one that wrote us in about having those eye problems. And Jay says that they've got an appointment with the ophthalmologist, and they thank us very much for our advice. So I hope everything that's a good move, seeing a professional on that. I don't want to screw around with your eyes. Yeah,
much like us telling you that we are not lawyers, and if you ever have a real solid pressing question on Parody, you should hire a lawyer. We would also tell you that if you ever have a medical problem, don't look at these two jokers. Go see a real professional, in this case, ophthalmologist. So I'm glad to see that they are going to see an ophthalmologist for that.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Dave. And that brings me to my question. Have we ever had a fight? Do we argue about anything? I feel like we have, but I'm not sure what that argument was.
Listen, shitbag, I think I don't want to talk to you. No. Do I ever fight with Brad? No, is the short version.
No.
First of all, I respect the heck out of him. And even though we sometimes take markedly different paths in our career, I still respect the path that Brad takes. I think the closest Brad we've ever gotten to a fight is an unexpected disagreement, a business disagreement. Like we had one on ProTips a couple weeks ago, if you remember.
Yeah, it actually happened on ProTips Live because I was talking about doing a reader survey, and you're like, nah, I don't think that's a great idea. I'm like, what do you mean? It's my pro tip this week. And Dave is like, well, yeah, but it's not scientific. You could get bad information. And at the end of the day, we both kind of agreed that if you want to do a reader survey, perfectly good thing to do. Don't take it too seriously. And if you decide not to, that's you're well within your rights not to as well, because it isn't scientific and you could get some information that it puts you off onto a different direction that you shouldn't be on. And that was kind of the worst it gets, pretty much because neither one of us are really confrontational people. So if at the end of the day, if you decide you want to do something either creatively or professionally that I disagree with, I might have we might have a conversation where we go, hey, do you think this is a good idea? And I might argue passionately against it. But if you still decide you want to do that thing, then I'm like, great, do it. I can't wait to see how it turns out. It might be the best thing in the world, and then I can steal that market research and do it myself.
Yeah, true.
But I don't think we've ever argued over something. I don't know that there's too many things. Number one, we think almost with the same brain on most of these issues. Like most of the stuff that comes up, I know exactly what you're going to say about it because it's kind of what I'm going to say about it. And the couple of things we disagree on just aren't very important things.
Yeah. It's also, it has the benefit of my career, though I learn from and glean great information from Brad. My career choices are not dependent on the choices Brad's making. Right. So if Brad goes down a path that I disagree with, I'm like, go with God. I hope it works for you. And frankly, if it does work for you, like Brad said, I'll steal the idea. And if it doesn't work, I'll be there to sarcastically judge you as a friend that you never should have gone down that path. But yeah, it's also, so I guess what I'm saying is, there's a strength in having an independent career that I own and control myself, because I don't really fight with Brad. Why would I? I wish Brad nothing but the best for his. Also, both Brad and I, for the most part, we choose joy in terms of interacting with the world. Even though we're somewhat introverted, we choose joy when we do. I think, although aside from Brad's driving, that's the one place where perhaps I disagree with Brad, as I'm white knuckling it as a passenger as he's honking and screaming. Oh God!
I'm telling you, if people would just learn the simple rules of the road, this would be all a lot easier. But I've got to be out on the road, giving them polite little honks, letting them know where they need to be, where they don't need to be. It's not my fault. I at the end of the day, I am put upon by these people on the road.
I have to tell you, we all have our outlet in life. And for some people, it's smoking. For some people, it's drinking. For me, it's chocolate. And for Brad, it's turning into Genghis Khan attacking the steps of Peking. And I'm like, Brad, what are you doing when you're driving? Where does this rage come from? But God bless him. He needs that to channel. And he's back to balance by the time he arrives at his location. He's the nicest guy to talk to.
I feel so much better when I get to my location because I've vented my spleen. Yeah.
But you know how sometimes like when your parents or grandparents get in their 80s and you kind of have that conversation where you take the keys away from them, you know, there are times where I'm like, do I have to take the keys away from Brad?
You keep going. We're going to have our first fight. I'll tell you that right now.
I mean, Brad, when do you get, let me ask you this one. When do you get most frustrated with me, which is different than,
when do
anger?
I get most frustrated? Honestly, I don't. It's not. I don't know that I've gotten frustrated with you. I honestly don't. Yeah, there's nothing that comes to mind.
Friendship. It's the perfect friendship. Anyway, keep going.
Even if your driving did bother me, I'd never be so low as to say it on a podcast. You know, but that's just me. I'm just
Zingo Zango. Look at him turn that around on me. Oh, man.
That's how I was brought up. I don't know.
Oh, what a delightful POS. Oh my God. That's how, that's maybe it's my Midwest nice, but I would never bring up someone's driving.
No, I'd never be so low. You know what the worst thing I could think of to say to you? The absolute worst thing I could think of to say?
What's that?
I'd say you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
I got to tell you, I normally spot it. I did not see it coming. So I'm going to say your hosts have been my friend, Brad Geiger. And I will say this about my friend who I've never argued with. He is the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com and only has 14 driving infractions from the state of Pennsylvania.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the jaywalking co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the parallel parking cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever-wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
And look for Dave's new sci-fi classic Drive Poorly at drivepoorly.com. If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one. This one comes in from Apple Podcasts. The headline is Infectious in a Good Way. And the text says, very fun and inspiring show. I am 50, but wondering if Dave and Brad would consider adopting me. Dave, what do you say? You wanna adopt this 50-year-old?
A bouncing baby 50-year-old, and we can be like, oh, look at the progress they're making, Brad. Oh, they're learning how to drive from their father, Brad. Oh, it's their first bird that they're flipping. Oh, look at that.
Baby's first bird.
Look at that. Look at how they lean on the horn. Oh, they're just like their dad. Oh, my goodness. And on that note, I'm going to say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab with a huge reminder. Just join us. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. And don't join at the free level, for God's sake.
Oh, for crying out loud. Dave will have to block you.
I will. And that's going to be over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. The timer is counting down. I'm looking away from what Time magazine described as one of America's hottest males. All right, we're counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, let me close this window of Tom Cruise and... Oh, there's Brad. All right. Oh, that was fun for everybody.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.